Well, hello, everybody. This is Louise Eddington, the Cosmic Owl of Cosmic Owl Astrology, and we have a Pluto retrograde coming up. Now, Pluto retrogrades every year, but I happen to believe that this Pluto retrograde is going to be the most profoundly impactful Pluto retrograde I've ever seen. For a quick context, Pluto retrogrades every year. So, making a big deal of something that retrogrades every year for a long period of time is not usually a very good practice. However, Pluto stations, the times around the degrees and days that Pluto stations retrograde and then direct, often bring big transformative changes and shifts. But this Pluto retrograde promises to be different. So I'm going to take you through this Pluto retrograde and show you the peak moments and why I think this one's different. And I will talk a little bit about, where in your chart you can look for to see if you're going to be personally more profoundly impacted. Okay. So, but first, before I do, please subscribe to my video. Please give me a thumbs up. Please leave me a comment if you enjoy the video or if you've got questions. I really appreciate the interaction and the support because of YouTube algorithms. The more you watch and the more you give me thumbs up and the more you comment, the more positive attention my videos get. So I would really appreciate that. So let's dive in. So Pluto is turning retrograde, and it's turning retrograde on May the 1st. Now, you will start to feel this energy about 5 days before. About 5 days before, 5 days after the station point is usually when we really start to feel the kind of churn. If you think of the energy of Pluto, Pluto is the energy of the excavator. He digs up the shadows. He dives into the shadows and mines the gold. Pluto is the miner. A lot of people fear Pluto transits. I don't, because my chart is such that I've had Pluto going over nearly every planet in my chart and an opposition to my moon and over my midheaven and ascendant, because all my planets are pretty much in one quadrant. And so that's just the makeup of my chart. So I call myself the Pluto transit queen. I find Pluto transits so rewarding, but they may not always be easy. But they do bring transformation. And that's why Pluto gets the reputation for being the planet of death and transformation. Pluto also is associated with depth psychology. Carl Jung and people like that really came to prominence when Pluto was discovered, and so did depth psychology and psychoanalysis and things like that. So you can get a real feel for what Pluto's about. He likes to dive deep into the shadows and excavate things. But my favorite phrase, which came from my teacher, Maridel Bowes, thank you, Maridel, I know you're probably watching this, is Pluto takes away what you thought was your power and leaves you with what is truly your power. So I can promise that if you lean into this Pluto transit that is quite profound, as I said, that you will reap the rewards. Okay. I like to think of Pluto. I'll just stop the share for a minute. I like to think of Pluto as mining diamonds. Okay, so you've got all these little diamonds deep within you, and in our society and humanness as well, because this is a big collective transit. We have these diamonds, we have this potential to shine, we have this potential to deal with our shadows and our less nice parts of ourselves and really produce something more powerful. So ultimately, Pluto transits are empowering, and I do think this one will be at a collective and personal level. So there's my rant about Pluto transits. Don't fear it. Lean in, do the work, and you will reap the rewards. So first of all, Pluto stations retrograde on May the 1st at 1:08 p.m. Washington, D.C. So this is the chart for that moment. And Pluto actually retrogrades for DC in the 6th house of service and work details and how we serve others. It's also what's called a cadent house, the 6th house, which is seen as less fortunate in traditional astrology explanations. And so we could say that this is going to transform how our US government perhaps serves the people. That's especially at the sign at 0 Aquarius, which is the sign of the people, humanitarianism, the collective. Okay. Now, other things I like about this chart, and because you're not all in the USA, I won't spend too much time on this. I do love that this part at the top, we have a Taurus midheaven with the Sun and Mercury about to be exactly conjunct right after Pluto station. So on the same day, we'll have a Mercury cazimi, where Mercury will be in the throne of the core organizing principle of our universe. And that is a moment of dazzling clarity. And Mercury and the Sun, and this applies to everybody, not just in the US, but Mercury and the Sun will be conjunct at 11 Taurus, and 11 is kind of this master number, this gateway number of potential, while Pluto stations retrograde at 0 Aquarius, which is the number of infinite beginnings, and it's the alpha and omega, the endings and beginnings, and encompasses everything. For the US, this Mercury cazimi is almost exactly conjunct the midheaven of the chart, the most public part of the chart. To my mind, this is a good indication that the US is being pulled towards living by its core true values, okay, and the core potential, because this is also very close to the Taurus North Node, and it's happening right in the middle of the eclipse season. May the 1st is just a couple of days, 4 days to be precise, before the lunar eclipse on May the 5th. You can find a video about that as well. And not only that, the Taurus North Node is in the 9th house, which is of higher learning, higher philosophies, and it's the experience of divine experiences, and it's also this place of the guru and the teacher. The fact that all this is at the top of the chart, I think, gives great potential for this chart. But again, I'm not going to just focus only on the USA. Okay, I will just talk one other thing though. For all of us, is that the moon is conjunct Ceres. And the moon is conjunct Ceres at 23 degrees of Virgo. Now, again, I've done a video on Ceres. She's one of my areas of study, and you can find it in my videos. I did a Ceres presentation. You just have to search, Cosmic Owl Astrology Ceres, and you'll find it. And this is actually 23 Virgo is actually in trine to 23 Taurus, which is where Ceres was discovered. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I think that 23 is a magical number. It's the magic number of chaos magic. It's also the most human number. We've got 23 digits, 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 ears and a nose. We've got 23 pairs of chromosomes. We've got, it takes 23 seconds for blood to run around the body. And also it's 23 is the number of days in our biorhythmic cycle. And you can see that this moon Ceres conjunction is in square to Venus when Pluto stations retrograde. Now, this is really important because Venus is heading towards a retrograde. and the Pluto station retrograde and the Pluto period of most immense transformation is very tied in with a Venus retrograde that we have coming up this summer. So I'm going to put a link in the description to my Venus retrograde class, which starts on July the 19th. And there is a 3-pay option in this class because I think this is going to be one of the most transformative summers ever. And I can promise you that my class, which involves shamanic healing practices, can help you move through this Venus retrograde summer that involves this amazing time with Pluto that I'll talk about more. But why I think this is also significant is that Venus at this magical number is square to Ceres. We could say that Ceres, Demeter, is the great, well, she is the great mother in astrology as well. She's how we nourish, she's how we nurture. She also represents grief and loss in the astrology chart, is square to Venus, which could be seen to be Persephone, and that's her daughter. And why is this so important? And I'll tell you why. It's because Venus, Ceres, and Pluto are all going to meet at 0 Aquarius on December the 7th, 2024. So this is part of their cycle that's heading towards this massive conjunction that they're going to have at this critical degree, 0 Aquarius, on December the 7th, 2024. So there's a lot leading into our karmic potential, if you like, as a collective in this chart. Now, before I go off this chart and talk about what's happening in July with Pluto, which is just like, wow. Pluto moved into Aquarius fairly recently. Can't remember the date, but doesn't matter. Pluto is not moving finally into Aquarius till November of 2024. So that will coincide, of course, with that conjunction that we talked about. Pluto this year has just visited Aquarius. It's going to spend 80-something days at that 0 of Aquarius. So it never left the 0 degree after Pluto entered 0 degree. Now, this is a critical degree because this is the degree that Jupiter and Saturn met on December the 21st, 2020, which was called the Great Conjunction. We have a Great Conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn every 20 years. But not only that, when Jupiter and Saturn met at the end of 2020, this was called the Great Mutation, because that means that all the great conjunctions every 20 years will be in the sign of air. So we are moving into an age of air. And Pluto's entry into that is activating that degree as well. And there's many other reasons we are moving into an age of air that is an age of discovery, renaissance, ideas, real innovation and invention. So I have huge hopes for these shifts that we're going through, as you may have gathered. But I want you to remember that this 0 Aquarius degree, where Pluto's stationing and where Pluto is spending so much time in 2023, it's a very critical degree. So this station itself is really critical. This is also the degree that Venus and Mars last met. And they last met there on March the 6th, 2022. So anything that hits that 0 Aquarius degree is really, really important right now, because Venus and Mars are the masculine and feminine principles in our universe. And it's the divine feminine and the divine masculine that comes in all of us. Okay. So anyway, that's a lot. But just to say, this is really important, I think, because Pluto is stationing at this degree. So it is stationing in an out of sign square to Haumea. I did do an article on a Pluto Haumea square. Haumea is birth. I believe she is helping us to birth the new paradigm, along with all of these dwarf planets. Pluto is officially now a dwarf planet. Haumea is a dwarf planet. There are others, and I do think they're all working together to birth the new paradigm. Haumea is the goddess of birth. I wrote an article about the Pluto Haumea square. They're squaring of 13 times. They started in 2022. I will also put that in the show notes, as well as the Venus retrograde class for you to take a look at. And I'm going to post it to my Substack blog. So if you want to subscribe to that, you'll get my daily posts in your inbox and more. So anyway, right. So that's the station retrograde. Now, between now and July, or between the station retrograde in July, Pluto does make quite a few aspects. He's quite busy between May the 1st and when things really heat up in July. But there's a couple of aspects I do want to talk about. So I'm going to share the general chart and move things around so I can show them to you. Okay, so we'll go to now. So the first significant aspect, I think, really, and I'm not going to spend too long on any of these, but we do have Jupiter squaring Pluto on May the 17th, all right? So on May the 17th, Pluto will still be at 0 degrees of Aquarius, and Jupiter will have just moved into the sign of Taurus. These are two fixed signs, and fixed signs tend to like to make things real, make things manifest. And Jupiter has moved into Venus sign Taurus, which is all about our core values, about getting rooted, about sustainability. And this is at that 0 degree number, which is the Fool in the tarot, which is possibilities, the Alpha, the Omega, infinite possibilities. I think this 0 degree square in fixed signs is really going to kind of start to push us to what we're wanting to create. Jupiter being Jupiter's quite happy, really, I think, in Taurus. Jupiter is ready to really expand our abundance and so on and so forth. It's a square, so there may be some difficulties along the way, and I do want to say, because of some of the aspects to this, we could see more financial up and downs this year, but I'm not an expert on that realm, so I'm not going to talk about that. But that's on the 17th, and shortly afterwards, just 3 days later, Mars comes up and opposes Pluto on the 20th. And Mars, this is again at that 0 degree mark. So in effect, this is making a T-square. Okay, and really, because their nodes are going to really start being involved right through Pluto's retrograde. I'll show you the peak point, but know that the nodes are going to be involved as well. This is really making a fixed Grand Cross. And fixed Grand Crosses are really bringing in immense change in our worlds. Fixed Grand Crosses, or Grand Squares as they call them, are really about changing things up. This is, if you think of fixed signs as making things real, a fixed Grand Cross breaks things up and then makes things new as well. So, you know, Mars tends to be a little bit of a destroyer as well, but Mars has moved into the sign of Leo, and he's like, about how do we want to lead? How do we want to lead from now on? There are some indications that some of this could be a little bit warlike throughout the summer. I'm not going to lie, but I'm hoping it's kind of more war of ideas rather than actual physical war. But let's hope it. But this is the sign of the leader against the humanitarian. And Mars and Pluto are the modern and traditional. So modern Pluto, Mars traditional rulers of the Scorpio South Node, which is has been asking us to release our hold on power. What are we really clinging to? What do we think was our power? So that brings me back to that phrase again, Pluto taking away what you thought was your power and leaving you with what is truly your power. To my mind, if we're really going to lean into the highest energy of this, we have to look at really what is our true power. And perhaps our true power is leading with the heart for the good of the people, which is Leo and Aquarius. Fingers crossed. And moving towards a more sustainable future with Jupiter conjunct that North Node in Taurus. Okay, that's really based on very strong core values. So that time around May the 17th to the 20th is a really important time, and it's kind of extended a little bit because the sun will move into Gemini and will trine Pluto also. But follow my Substack blog, a link in below. You can go and read that article that I wrote about Pluto Haumea and subscribe to the blog while you're there. So that's kind of the end of May. One other important aspect before Pluto slips back into the sign of Capricorn is that Venus will then come up as well. And Venus will hit that 0-degree mark as well. So you can see that Venus and Mars are getting very close together. And remember, they met at that 0 Aquarius point on March the 6th, 2022. They never quite get together because Venus in the sign of Leo is now approaching her retrograde. Again, check out my class. And even though she's getting so close, they never quite meet. And she goes retrograde and Mars gallops off and they meet again later. But I'm not going to talk about that at this point. Now, on the 11th, I am actually going to get a different aspect up because I can't quite retrograde into reverses very easily, or at least it's something I'm not doing right in my software that doesn't show me. But on June the 11th, Pluto moves back into Capricorn for a visit and will spend the rest of his retrograde back in the sign of Capricorn. Now, remember, Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn since 2008. He's been excavating a lot of what's wrong with our institutions, but also the structures of our lives, which is very Capricornian. He's been causing, big transformations in those areas. And he's going back to kind of mop up and finish what he started since 2008. When Pluto moved into Capricorn, we had the first big banking crisis, the collapse and people losing their homes in 2008. I do have to say I'm a little concerned that there may be some more of that. Some people are predicting recession. I'm not a financial astrologer, but just forewarned and forearmed, and shore up your own resources moving into this period. Make sure you're not you're a little bit risk averse and things. I would probably advise over this summer because we have some pretty big aspects. Then at the end of June, well, the middle more, Pluto will make why as well, Mercury at this point, we have this big conjunction here. On the 11th, Mercury will trine Pluto. Mercury has now gone out of retrograde, moved forward out of his retrograde shadow. We're going to get some big news as Mercury trines Pluto. Some big changes. Mercury is associated with words that begin with transitions, traverse, transition, all those kind of things. I think there's going to be some news of big changes with the Mercury trine Pluto. Not necessarily bad, but it's definitely going to bring news of change as Pluto moves back into Capricorn. On that same day, or the next day rather, Pluto will trine Sedna. Now, Sedna is another dwarf planet. She's the furthest one out. She has an 11,408-year orbit. Okay, and I've found that she is associated with huge cycles of human change in the way humans live, and also climate change. And I think this could bring some big news around climate and around how we have to change our way of living in a big way. Now, when Sedna was last around this degree, I've said it many times, that was at the end of the big ice ages. And that's when people moved into agrarian farming and things. And I think it's probably evident that as much as we're trying to cling that Scorpio South Node to our old ways of power and our old institutions, with Pluto going back into Capricorn, I think it's becoming clear that unless we radically change the way we live, you know, we are kind of destroying our habitat for us. The Earth will be fine. We probably won't. Adding to that kind of energy is that on the 20th, so this is really kind of all happening together. There's this big earthy grand trine going on here. Sedna moves into Gemini, though, so you know that's going to be a big shift on its own. I'll probably have to do a whole different video for that one. But look at this, where Sedna was, Vesta moves to 29 degrees of Taurus. This is all earth signs. Ceres, the Great Mother, moves to 29 degrees of Virgo, and they both trine this. And on that day, the moon actually joins in to make a kite. I think there's going to be some big emotion come up and some grief. There could be some earthy events or some climate news or something like that that really brings up the need for this big earth-changing events that we are being called to do as we move into the new paradigm. So that point as well, the 20th to the 22nd-ish is really big as well. Okay. But then we get to the real big stuff in July. And I'm kind of like, whoa. When I look at all of this, I'm really going to talk about this mainly in collective. The time from the 21st of July to July the 28th is just massive. And of course, it doesn't all happen just on those days. We'll feel it building, and I think that period, that week, is going to be just a week to remember. Now, it starts when the sun reaches this anaretic degree. Now, remember, the anaretic degree is by some astrologers called the killing degree. But I prefer to call it the liminal degree of change. I always think of the 29th degree of the signs as being at the threshold of a new country. We can smell it, we can taste it. I read this somewhere, and I wish I could give the person credit. I think it's my friend Leah Whitehorse, actually. I think it is. My friend Leah Whitehorse of Lua Astrology, LUA, wrote a great article called Tales from the Threshold about the 29th degree. You can smell and taste that new country, but you're finishing up the business in the old country. You're kind of at that border crossing here, waiting to leave the old country behind and enter the new country. So it's kind of tense. It's kind of like you've perhaps got some unfinished business, and will I make it into the new country kind of energy. That's how it feels to me. And this is what's happening this week. It's just huge. And I can't really separate it. So I'm going to leave the chart where it is and draw some lines, because I love to draw my lines. So it's kind of activated at the start by this sun opposing Pluto. Okay. Now then, as well, so both the sun and Pluto are then going to square the nodes. And this is all happening at this liminal 29th degree. But to kind of add to that, really, and this, by the way, is in cardinal signs, which are initiating signs. They like to start change, and then the fixed signs make it real. So I think this is just going to launch unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable changes in our society and the way we live this year. Okay. And Pluto is over there at the 29th degree. The sun is up here. Now, the sun is in an out of sign conjunction here with Hecate, who is the triple moon goddess, who is the goddess of the crossroads. So that further indicates to me that we are at a crossroads on this. But even more, both the sun and Pluto are squaring the nodes all that week, really. But Pluto will square the nodes 3 times. It will square the nodes exactly on the 23rd, exactly on the 25th, and again exactly on the 28th. But also in this time, Pluto will, because Haumea is moving direct, Pluto will also square Haumea at 28 degrees and 58 minutes, which is close enough to the 29th degree. Okay, so, you know, this is all really all happening together. There's more I want to say about this too. But also, as this happens, so the sun on the 21st, the sun opposes the Pluto and squares the nodes. Then on the 22nd, Venus, who is in the sign of Leo, here she is, will actually station retrograde at 28 degrees Leo 36, so very close to the anaretic degree as well. So there's Venus. So Venus is stationing retrograde at the same time as all of this happens, and it's all at those end degrees, apart from Hecate, who's guiding us into the future. Also, the North Node in Aries is close to Eris, the shit stirrer. This is hugely discordant. This is huge change. And really, Eris can bring some paradigm shifts too. We saw, as I record this, we just had the Jupiter-Eris conjunction that, for one thing, brought the ousting of Tucker Carlson from Fox News and Don Lemon from CNN. Not so critical, but there's rumors that it's also going to, there's more heads are going to fall. I also read that Prince William in the UK won a big settlement. Well, didn't win, settled a big settlement with Robert Murdoch. Robert Murdoch is having to pay out stack loads of money, and he represents, very Capricornian institution. Like, he's got all the money, billionaire, lots of power, all of this kind of stuff. I wonder if this fixed Grand Cross and the square to the nodes and Venus retrograde are really going to bring a lot of these oligarchs down, a lot of this old institutions, old ways of doing things, old hierarchies. I think there's going to be some big collapses, and I hope it stays with them and doesn't impact too many ordinary people. Now, the fact that this fixed Grand Cross involves the lunar nodes makes it a major turning point. That any planet or angle or anything square to the nodes is an important turning point in the collective astrology. So not only do we have it all at these end degrees of signs, it's square the nodes, and the nodes have just moved back into the signs of Aries and Libra, where they're going to be for 19 months. This is huge, people. I don't know what to say. I can't predict exactly how it's going to go, but it's I associate Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn with our identity, both collectively and individually. So Aries is very much I am. Cancer is very much who am I deep inside. Okay. Libra is who am I in significant relationships. Capricorn is who am I publicly? What is my reputation? How am I visible publicly? So if we extrapolate that from, you know, as without, so within, this is all about our identity as humans, really, as countries, as humans, as individuals, as collectives. This is huge. I cannot tell you enough. And the fact that it coincides with Venus stationing retrograde. Let me just get rid of that drawing and just go and show you the actual Venus station. And then I might go back and draw the lines again because they'll go out of place if I do it. At that point, okay, so we have Pluto here. Square the nodes. Square the nodes, and really square Haumea too. Square to the sun, and there's Venus going retrograde. At this point, we also have the sun meeting asteroid Lilith, also at the very end degrees. So at this point, we have Neptune opposing that. That on itself is going to be, this is the practical mystic line, net Pisces to Virgo. This is bringing big change as well. I'll talk more about that nearer the time. We also have Black Moon Lilith conjunct Venus at the end degree as Venus stations retrograde. I'll be going into huge detail on this in the Venus retrograde class, really drilling down and doing some work around it, some shamanic work around it. So I hope you'll join me. But this is change, massive, massive change. Asteroid Lilith tends to be the talk to the hand Lilith. Okay, she's stationing direct at 10 Virgo as I record this, basically. But by this point, by the midsummer, she will have got to 27 degrees Virgo. Conjunct the moon, which is our emotions. The sun is at the liminal degree, the last degree of Cancer. This is going to be a very emotional week. The last thing I want to say about it, and I just want you to be kind of forewarned, forearmed, and so that you can lean in and shore up your resources, is big changes coming. I do want to say that at this point, the nodes and Haumea close to it as we reached this point is on the degree of the first Venus star point in Leo since the late 18th, in Libra, since the late 18th century, or since the late 19th century, sorry. We had a Sun-Venus conjunction on October the 22nd, 22 at 29 Libra, conjunct Haumea, rebirth. Libra is an air sign, birthing this age of air, this renaissance, this inventive time, new ideas, new inventions. It's an exciting time, but I do think it's going to be quite challenging this summer, personally. So on the 28th, Pluto. So we can see that on, oh, sorry, stop it. Sorry, I went to Neptune. That's not what we want at all. Bear with me. Just let the computer do its thing. On July the 28th, that's kind of the end of that week, Pluto makes the final square to the nodes before Pluto moves back that way, and the nodes will their primary direction from our perspective is retrograde. So the North Node will start moving backwards through Aries, and they will not square again. But I'm going to say they're going to remain in orb throughout Pluto's whole retrograde. Okay, so this whole summer, Pluto went retrograde on May the 1st until October when Pluto moves direct. We'll look at that chart in a minute. They are in orb. So this Pluto retrograde is going to bring massive changes. So hold on to your hats. A couple of other aspects after that week, the summer of the week. Remember, it's just going to be ongoing, but that's the peak point. Oh, I did want to mention one other thing in this. On July the 23rd, Chiron also stations retrograde at 19 degrees and 57 minutes of Aries. I'm not going to go back to that, but that's happening on the 23rd as all this happens as well. And most astrologers believe, and I'm one of them, that Chiron in Aries is really asking us to heal our core identity wounds and our masculine energy within ourselves, the divine masculine, if you like, and where we're aggressive, where we're not working with people, where we're not coming together. So that's another part of the change. Venus going retrograde, Chiron going retrograde, as all this happens. It's going to be a week to remember. So in September, though, moving on, and I'll show you kind of thing how this is still happening altogether. We've got two more significant aspects before Pluto moves direct and things really start to change again. But I'm only going to look at this period now. September the 10th. Okay, we have Pluto has moved back to 28 degrees and will square Sirius. And guess what Sirius is? Conjunct Haumea. So another big square, and it's activating that Libra star point, the Sun-Venus conjunction from last October, while Venus is actually moved direct by this point. Okay, so again, I'll drill down into all of this in my Venus retrograde class, so I hope you'll join me. But you can see that at this point, the nodes have moved back from that 29th degree to 25 degrees, but there was still in at least a T-square. At this point, we have nothing opposing really in the end of Cancer as we used to before. Earlier in the day, the moon will, so that could activate something in this cardinal grand cross. But look at this, the North Node, when Pluto squares Sirius, the North Node is still in aspect of this square to Pluto, and the North Node is now conjunct Shitstirrer Eris, who likes to really kind of reveal inequities and people who have wronged other people and so on and so forth. I found it interesting that when Jupiter was conjunct Eris at 24 of Aries, just when Tucker Carlson was let go of, or parted ways, should we say, and Don Lemon was let go of, there's both rumors about them being quite sexist and of being, you know, that's kind of why they've gone. I have no evidence for that, so I won't. Anyway. So we can see, though, that this is ongoing. This is still all at the very end degrees of the cardinal signs, even though it's not at the anaretic degree. The peak in July is the biggest time, but this is still considerable. And remember, I said that Pluto, Ceres, and Venus, which I think really kind of represent the three stories in the Demeter, Persephone, Hades story, and the stories of the Eleusinian mysteries. I think these aspects between Pluto, Ceres, and when Venus is involved as well are about us coming to terms with our humanity and the fact that we all have shadow, and the fact we can't remain in this innocent Eden together, and how do we come together and forgive ourselves and move beyond that and integrate the light and the shadow. It's an ongoing thing, and it's something I'm passionate about, and I'll be working with it in my Venus class. On October the 8th, I think it is, the last very significant aspect that we'll have during Pluto's retrograde is on October the 8th, Pluto's back to 27 degrees, where he's going to station direct. Mars gets to the end of Libra and will square Pluto. And we kind of came in with that early on when Mars opposed Pluto on May the 20th. By this point, Pluto's hardly moved, but Mars opposed Pluto at the 0 Aquarius Leo mark, and now Mars has moved all the way to the end of Libra and squares Pluto to say, and this is kind of a closing quarter. Mars opposed Pluto, now Mars is approaching Pluto. That's a finishing, that's a releasing. What have we learned? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to change? What do we need to transform? Ready for when Mars approaches Pluto and they conjunct, but that's another time later. Then on October the 10th, Pluto will turn direct. So let's look at that chart quickly as well. October the 10th, Pluto will station direct at 27 degrees, 53 minutes. Still really in a square to Mars. Again, this is set for the USA, for DC. This one has a 17-degree midheaven Aquarius in the sign of the people. And this is all mainly, well, Pluto's happening in the 9th house, the guru, the truth. Also higher learning. What have we learned? What have we changed? Remember, the 9th house was active in the last chart. Saturn is in Pisces in the 10th house. Saturn likes this 10th house. Are we going to have learned our lesson and be leading more spiritually, or find a new kind of more spiritual elder kind of leader? Or elect the same one if you think that's the right person, but I'm not going to get political. Haumea will have moved into Scorpio at this point for a long time. She's done, but she's going to be still squaring Pluto over the next few years, as you'll see in the article. So this is what I call the aspect of the decade. They square off till 2028. I think the two of those are really birthing the age of Aquarius personally. I love this 5th house. I love this in Leo. So much in Libra in the 5th house. Creative, harmony, balance, diplomacy. Maybe we get such a big warning in the summer that we have to come together and create new alliances, new relationships, and stop being so polarized. And my hope, yeah, is all that part of it. Anyway, I'm not going to do a whole analysis on this. You know, I'm not the biggest one for analyzing a country's chart, and I do realize it does impact all of you. Now then, where will you be affected? I'm not going to do an all signs video because this is such a big collective energy, but I will say, if you have any placements at all, so that means where your sun, moon and planets are, or your angles, the ascendant, or the midheaven or descendant, or the bottom of your chart, the IC, at those very last degrees and the very first couple of degrees, but the last degrees particularly of the cardinal signs. So that's Aries, Cancer and Libra and Capricorn. You will probably be quite personally affected by this and have big changes. They're probably ongoing changes because you've been impacted at those degrees for quite some time, but this is kind of the peak finishing of it all. So hold on to your hats. But this is so big that I'm going to say, if anybody has any placements at the very end degrees of any sign, is going to feel some impact. Also because of the Venus retrograde, and the beginning of this is going to affect the fixed signs too. So Taurus, Leo, Scorpio and Aquarius, and particularly the early degrees of the signs for you. But this is big. This is collective. This is hold on to your hats weather. This is look out for that week to remember, particularly around the time from July the 21st to 28th. I don't think the world is going to look the same after that point, and it's going to unleash amazing changes and transformation. I do think ultimately it's going to be positive. As I started off by saying, Pluto takes away what you thought was your power and leaves you with what is truly your power. And he's mining our diamonds. He's giving us an opportunity to dig deep and create something amazing and empowering and wonderful. So I'll leave it at that. And please, again, subscribe, leave me a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and read my article about Pluto and Haumea, and check out my Venus retrograde class. It has a 3-pay option right now. That will change in about a month's time to a 2-pay option. And then after that, it will go to a 1-pay option, because I like to offer a payment plan for early adopters, but I prefer that the class is paid for when it starts, and then we can just focus on the class. So it's 8 weeks, 8 calls, 7 weeks, 1 call at the beginning, 1 call at the end, from July the 19th to, I think the last one is September the 6th. It's quite intensive. There's a call a week, and there's kind of a little bit of journey work and shamanic healing work. We do soul retrieval. We do all kinds of other fun things like that as well. So anyway, I am a trained shamanic practitioner, by the way, so I've been doing it in my Venus classes for a long time, and it's really impactful. It's a life-changing class. Anyway, enough about that. I will leave you to it. Enjoy, and just kind of mark those dates on your calendar and shore up your resources a bit. Make sure you're quite safe and secure as much as can be. Much love to you.